There seems to be a thought pattern that we need to suspend freedoms to save democracy and compromise health and safety standards to keep everyone healthy and safe. Does this logical fallacy have a name or a precedent? Man, again, you guys are on fire today. That is so perfectly formulated.
It's not exactly the big lie, but it's related to it, right? The idea, and there's something about the catch-22 nature of things, that the point is the paradox needs to be exactly symmetrical in order for it to work somehow. The closer it is to saying something that is perfectly impossible, the more effective it is.
It feels, it's not a catch-22, but it feels more like a catch-22 than the big lie. The big lie strikes me as we're going to say something so preposterous that you can't possibly imagine we'd be lying about something this big. But it's content-free, right? The big lie says nothing at all about content, whereas this observation is, in order to save X, you need to destroy X first. In order to save Y, first you need to go after Y. Like it is content neutral with regard to, like, it could be any X or any Y presumably, but it is content specific in that in order to save X, you need to first go after X. Like there has to be an X there, whereas the big lie doesn't do that at all. So yeah. I don't feel like that's this. Catch-22 gets a little closer, but not quite. And I'm trying to think. I imagine, I don't know if you're looking at the chat, Zach, if anyone comes up with anything.
So I like we had to destroy X to save X. So it's sort of like the melee
well,
paradox.
And that's what the question asker has said. We need to suspend freedoms to save democracy. We need to compromise health and safety standards to keep everyone healthy and safe.
Yes, we need to destroy military readiness in order to make ourselves militarily ready. We need to get students to submit to an indefensible medical interpretation of the facts in order that they can learn how to interpret facts. Right? It is this in every case, and it is causing what I think for many of us is a mind-boggling schism, because for some of us, if you say, the reason we compromised military readiness was to make ourselves militarily ready, it's like, well, I don't know what error you're making, but I can tell that that's bullshit, right? And
if you look at the excuse and you say sort of, that's happening over here, and then over in this different part of the play, you're like, okay, that thing that you're doing, is that going to enhance military readiness or compromise it? And maybe you can't get there in one step. Maybe it takes 5 steps to get there. But if you can, if the thing that has been implemented can be agreed on by the people who are doing it to, have the effect of, for instance, decreasing military readiness, then you can take that and move it back in here and say, okay, then, if L22, whatever it is that you were calling it, equals X, and we recognize that the system is there to enhance X, and L22 that you've just implemented, which equals X, decreases X, then decreasing X can't increase X.
All right.
And that was kludgy, but I think it holds.
Let's try this. First of all, I will say this was the topic I talked in Arizona about, was how could Orwell have been this right? Right? Mm-hmm. As I've said on DarkHorse before, the upside downness of the language seems too extreme to be real, and yet we are living in an era in which the language has been turned that upside down. So what if the point is, if something were to get into your system with the intent of getting you to wreck it yourself?
Your bigger system, not an individual bodily system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frankly,
it might work, but that's what you're
talking about. Might work for bodily system, but I'm talking about our social systems. That effectively what it would do is it would send a divide by zero message. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? It would get in and it would tell you to divide by zero, which frankly, if you go back to our response to being demonetized by YouTube, we asked YouTube to divide by zero because frankly, YouTube is illegitimate if it decides to manage what we can and cannot say in a way that is bad for us. Mm-hmm. But you could imagine something getting into your system and trying to get, if you set X equal to 1 over X, right, then
you
create a situation where...
But how do you... I mean, the thing that we keep on arriving back at in mass psychosis is one answer, and it's at least a partial answer, but like, how do you get people to accept? How is it that so many people have accepted that x equals 1 over x?
Well,
and that's actually one possible framing for like, does this logical fallacy have a name or precedent? Like, if it doesn't, a name for it might be the x equals 1 over x fallacy.
Okay, but this does have a well-studied...
Except that doesn't work because x could be 1.
There are x's for which it can work.
Yeah.
But the point is you can't set it that way as a policy.
Right. Okay. Yep.
But, the point is that it doesn't make sense in math. It makes sense in programming. You can tell a computer to do this, but you can't assert that it's true, right?
Right. Right. Okay, good distinction. Yeah.
But the problem is we know more or less. In fact, I would say we know very well how you get people to accept transparently false syllogisms. And the way you do it is making the cost of not accepting it so high that acceptance is the only rational thing to do from the perspective of well-being, which is
That's one of the ways. Another way is that you prime them. You inform them in advance about how awesome thing X is. And then when thing Y comes in, dressed as an X, you say, look at this brand new X. Mm-hmm. And when some people's like, that's a Y. That's not an X at all. Like, come on, don't you love X?
Right. You wouldn't want to be one of those anti-Xers.
No, you certainly wouldn't.
No. So that's true, but I think that still fits the paradigm. If we map anti-vaxxers onto what you just said, right? We all know that vaccines are a fantastic mechanism for limiting the spread of contagious diseases, right? Then you introduce something and you ensure that the terminology used for it is vaccine, and then anybody who says, hey, wait a minute, that's not a good idea, it doesn't matter biologist or not, the point is, oh, didn't know you were an anti-vaxxer. Right. But the point is, when they say anti-vaxxer, what they're doing is they're threatening you. As we explored in an earlier episode, there's a buzzsaw with anti-vaxxer on the label. And if you come anywhere near questioning anything that comes through a syringe, you get shoved into it. Yeah.
So presumably lots of precedents that we can discover. It seems like they're all coming right now. There's so many coming right now that it's extraordinary. I'm curious if I feel like every logical fallacy that can be made has been named. Mm-hmm. And often I feel like people wield the names of the fallacies without knowing what they are, and they think they're educated as a result. So I don't know the names of most of the fallacies as a result because I find it a silly way to demonstrate knowledge. But I am curious if this one does have a name. I assume it does, but I like, at least for now, the stand-in of the x equals 1 over x fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which it sounds, said that way, it sounds absurd. And yet it is exactly that absurd, and that's why I very much like the way that she has, and I'm just going to read it once more. There seems to be which is that there seems to be a thought pattern that we need to suspend freedoms to save democracy and compromise health and safety standards to keep everyone healthy and safe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent. Love this question.